We are being told by the White House that Epstein didn't have a client list, wasn't tied to any kind of intelligence, no human trafficking. A lot of people are sitting there saying, what are you talking about? It's been trending not for one day, now about a week and a half, and they keep pushing it back. So I said, listen, let's do a little bit of due diligence and just kind of do a Epstein file like we did a Diddy file. Here's what we find out. Do you know Epstein owned an 8,000-acre property in New Mexico? Do you know what he actually did in that property? Nobody talks about that. Very weird. Do you know what Epstein did with his money 2 days before he died? Do you know what he did with his nearly $600 million in assets? Do you know the private residence that they say he owned, the most expensive private residence in Manhattan? Nearly $100 million. Do you know how he got it? Do you know how he got the property? Do you know about it? A lot of weird things. And a lot of people have been saying things about this guy for a long time. We're going to talk about it today. If you give value out of this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. So watch this. There seems to be a pattern that this guy Epstein was untouchable. Remember back in the days, the mob movie, The Untouchables? It sounds like this guy was untouchable. Why was he untouchable? Why did a lot of people say he can't touch him? Here's Alex Acosta. He was a U.S. attorney who proved the deal, reportedly told Epstein's transition team the following: I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and leave it alone. Don't bother this topic. This is a July 2019 article from the Daily Beast. Then you have Cindy McCain, John McCain's wife. January 2020, she said at a conference, Epstein was hiding in plain sight. We all knew about him. We all knew what he was doing, but we had no legal aspect that would go after him. They were afraid of him for whatever reason. They were afraid of him. That's her. Julie K. Brunt, investigative reporter for Miami Herald. There were all these powerful people who knew, and they looked the other way. Here's another one for you. Vicky Ward, journalist who profiled Epstein for the Vanity Fair. My editors removed damning quotes from young women who were victimized by Epstein. Everyone knew he was dangerous. Why? Why are they so afraid of this guy? Why can't they talk about this guy? Anyways, so this guy dies. When he does, net worth roughly $600 million. $77 million was the Manhattan mansion that we're talking about, the most expensive private residence in Manhattan. $63 million was the island, the Little St. James. $18 to $25 million was a Zorro Ranch when we talk about 8,000 acres in New Mexico. $12 to $15 million Palm Beach Estate. Paris apartment, $8 to $10 million. Aircraft, roughly $10 million with the helicopter. Art, cash, jewelry investments, $300 million. This guy was 577. How the hell did you make that kind of money? What did he do? So if you go look at his background and his past, you'll notice this guy was born in Brooklyn in '53 to working class Jewish parents. Father worked at New York City Parks. Epstein attended Lafayette High School, skipped 2 grades, and then attended Cooper Union and then NYU, but never graduated from NYU. At 14, he attended the elite Interlochen Center for the Arts on a music scholarship. Epstein later on used this affiliation to recruit girls into his trafficking ring, allegedly, that you read about, and even built his own lodge there. Then in 1974, he began teaching math and physics at Dalton, an elite Manhattan prep school. He was hired by Donald Barr, who is Bill Barr's father. By the way, Bill Barr's father wrote something very interesting. He wrote a book called Space Relations, a scientific fiction novel in 1973 set in a future where humans have formed an intergalactic empire ruled by aristocrats, where they ruled over and engaged in coercive acts with enslaved individuals, including teenagers, in a breeding clinic. Little weird. What book did your dad write? My dad wrote this book about, you know what I'm saying? A book about, enslaving individuals and engaging in coercive acts, including teenagers in a breeding clinic. Oh, okay, normal dad. Everybody's dad writes stuff like that. I mean, my dad wrote a book like that. You understand what I'm saying? It's a little weird when you go to, but what does Bill Barr have to do with this? We'll come back to this. So now later on, he goes to Bear Stearns, starts working there, enters into the financial network 76 to 81. So at the time, he starts working with Alan Greenberg at Bear Stearns, becomes a partner in 1980 due to his skill in tax law, then insider training and mysterious exit. In 1981, he all of a sudden resigns. Suspicious circumstances during an SEC investigation into insider trading linked to Seagram attempt takeover of St. Joe Minerals, an operation involving the Bronfman family. He was never charged, but was interviewed by the SEC, which was skeptical of his denials. Then, according to Stephen Hoffenberg, and other sources, Epstein worked closely with British arms dealers at Sir Douglas Lease and Saudi arms trafficker Adnan Khashoggi. This operation tied to Iran-Contra era funneled Chinese Norco weapons to Iran. Epstein allegedly learned money laundering and armed trading during this period, working with Stephen Hoffenberg. Then after that, the Mossad links. Epstein was introduced to Israeli intelligence circles by Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father. According to ex-Mossad operative Ari Ben Manasseh, he was approved by higher-ups in Israeli military intelligence and began participating in Israeli arms deals. So this next one, a very interesting mentor here, that even when I interviewed his brother, Mark Epstein brought this name up, Stephen Hoffenberg, the Hoffenberg era in the financial front from 87 to 93. Epstein partnered with Hoffenberg in a massive Ponzi scheme via Tower Financial. Though Hoffenberg went to prison, Epstein escaped prosecution. Hoffenberg later claimed that Epstein was the mastermind and the key figure in laundering those stolen funds. Nothing happened to him. Fast forward. Now he gets linked up with this guy named Wexner. Remember how earlier I talked to you about how did he end up getting the most expensive private residence in Manhattan? You're about to find out how this happens. So he goes and starts working with Wexner. He becomes his protege. Epstein gained enormous influence as financial manager for Leslie Wexner, billionaire founder of L Brands, which Victoria's Secret's one of them. Epstein helped Wexner acquire manage real estate projects with links to shadowy entities. Wexner, allegedly this billionaire, ends up firing his entire financial team and handed Epstein enormous power over his fortune. You know what kind of power? Power of attorney? What? To who? To Epstein? Yeah. So power of attorney means he can make decision on this billionaire's behalf? Yes. Why? I don't know. It's kind of weird. And then what did Wexner do at the end? Well, Wexner ended up giving the most expensive private residence to him as a gift? Yeah. Gift? Yeah. A $77 million gift? Yeah. Why? Was this a son? That's a son, right? No relation. Blood? No. Why would he do that? He was questioned later and he said it was an economic arrangement. A 21,000 square foot penthouse is an economic arrangement? Yes. And what did he put on the balance sheet that he paid him? Zero. It's a gift. Then you got a couple other things comes up. Mar-a-Lago, he's there. One of the workers there, Virginia Giuffre, who was recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell, who's a Mar-a-Lago spa attendant. And then there's connections there. And then later on, when Trump finds out what happens with Epstein, Virginia Giuffre goes with them. Later on, when Trump finds out what happened with Epstein, October of 2007, he banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago, can't come back. So that's that relationship that's taking place. So then we have Bill Clinton. And when it comes down to Bill Clinton on flight logs, he flew with Epstein 26 times. 17 times Epstein visited the White House. Multiple times he went with Epstein to his private residence and to his island. On many occasions, Secret Service wasn't with him. Little weird when you're having that kind of connections. Epstein was reportedly involved in raising funds for the Clinton Foundation, and their financier ties may have included shared donors like Lex Wexner. And then you got Prince Andrew. We've seen the pictures all over the place with a young Virginia Giuffre that's over there. And, you know, when he was going through what he was going through, the British intelligence played a role in protecting the royal family from full scandal. His connections to the elite power players made him a liability, but also useful leverage for intelligence operations tied to Epstein's blackmail ring. Then this continues with more names. Gates, wife, gets a divorce from him and says, I didn't like the fact that he was too close to Epstein. And when they're asking Gates like, yeah, she was probably right. I shouldn't have spent time, but he spent time with him after the 2008 conviction, despite claiming otherwise. Meetings were documented on 2011 and 2013, often in Epstein's Manhattan mansion. What do you do after? At least if it's pre, you're going even after, like you can't even going afterwards saying, I'm going to meet with Epstein. Wife leaves him publicly. She says, I didn't feel comfortable with the relationship. It's a little bit too public. And these stories can continue going with the way it's used with other people. You've heard names with MBS and others. You know, there's been pictures with Musk and Ghislaine. But again, Musk could be simply at a party that's hanging out with other billionaires that they're there. Musk himself called the idea absurd and radioactive, stating Epstein never advised me on anything because Epstein apparently, you know, described himself as an advisor during an intense period that they're negotiating certain things. Elon didn't like that. Leon Black, this one's a little bit weird with Epstein, co-founder of Apollo Global, later became a top executive at BlackRock after 2006. In 2019, Senator Ron Wyden released a letter detailing Black's financial relationship with Epstein. Ready for this one? Remember how that one guy, Lex Wexner, gave him a $77 million most expensive private residence in Manhattan? Look at this one here. Leon Black paid Epstein $158 million between 2012 and 2017 for consulting services, and paid an additional $20 million explicitly for a trust transaction that saved him $600 million in future tax liabilities. Maybe it's right. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's what he did. Little weird to pay $158 over a 5-year period. And then this continues, different visits. Former Prime Minister and Defense Minister of Israel between 2013 and 2017, frequent visits. Again, Barack visited Epstein's home in New York about 30 times between 2013 and 2017. 30 times? Maybe they're talking intel, maybe they're talking investments, maybe they're talking taxes. Maybe they're talking the most recent trade Yankees he's not happy about. I don't know. Maybe they're talking why the Knicks haven't won a championship since '72. Could be a lot of different things they're talking about. In one notable trip in 2014, Barack flew with Epstein from Palm Beach to Tampa on Epstein's private island. What are they doing? They're talking business speculation. I have no clue. Little weird, that many visits. Somebody may say, well, he's Jewish. So once you become wealthy, I mean, you're eventually going to be tied to whatever national. Okay, I'm Armenian, I'm tied to a lot of, I'm Assyrian. Yes, that does kind of make sense. At this level, who knows? Maybe it is. It's a little weird. It's a little suspect. You have to put it out there. Here's a former Israeli intelligence officer, Ari Ben Menashe, has made several striking claims about Epstein's role as intelligence asset primarily for Israel's Mossad. Here's a small little assessment that he made, his assertions. You ready? Number one, Epstein and Maxwell were part of Mossad-run operations. He told investigative journalist Zev Shalev that he was introduced to Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell in the mid-'80s by Robert Maxwell, a figure that had deep ties to Israeli intelligence. According to Ben, Epstein and Maxwell were already working with Israeli intelligence at the time, and that's in the mid-'80s. Then honey trap operations from Compromise Collection. He described Epstein's sex trafficking enterprise as deliberate honey trap operation offering sexual encounters and underage girls to powerful individuals as a means to gather compromising material, allegedly using to blackmail them on behalf of Mossad. And in part of Maxwell's circle and Iran-Contra connections, Ben also claimed that network included Maxwell, Daily Mirror editor Nick Davies, and himself, including that Epstein and Maxwell were integrated into continuing Mossad-linked operations stemming from Iran-Contra arms and espionage dealings. This guy's an intelligence officer. I just recently had a guy, John Chirac, on the podcast. He was the first CIA officer to come out and speak against the president for waterboarding, went to jail for 23 months. This CIA officer, whistleblower. So, do you trust him? It's up to you. This is coming from a guy that's on the inside, like giving stuff like this. Now, the pushback denials. Naftali Bennett, former Israeli prime minister, has categorically denied these claims. He stated with 100% certainty that Epstein never worked for Mossad and that the speculation to the contrary is categorically and totally false. Do you believe him? Maybe. I had the former Mossad director of Mossad interview I did 4 years ago, 5 years ago, but he was a Mossad director of Mossad from the 80s. I couldn't get nothing out of him when I spoke to him. It was very interesting how he interviewed. You're either going to sit here and say, you know what, I believe it, or I don't. Great, it's your position. This other part, you have to almost put in here, if you're making the argument, you make a decision for yourself. Guy named Michael Baden, sketchy doctor, a lot of people say, but some people also give him credibility. He's the only guy that did the autopsy on JFK, Martin Luther King, O.J. Simpson, on what happened with Nicole, Phil Spector, Jeffrey Epstein, and George Floyd. Okay, here's what he said. JFK assassination, concluded JFK was shot from behind, supporting single shooter theory. Okay. MLK upheld that James Earl Ray was likely the lone shooter. All right. O.J. Simpson suggested murders occurred later than prosecution claimed, questioning wound patterns. All right. Phil Spector argued the victim may have committed suicide, theory rejected by jury. Jeffrey Epstein disputed official suicide ruling, said injuries consistent with homicidal strangulation. Homicidal strangulation? Yes. George Floyd concluded death was due to asphyxia from sustained neck and back compression. What Derek Chauvin had his knee on his neck, that's what they're talking about. Now here's a kicker before I say anything. Watch this. Jeffrey Epstein, the conclusion he came up with saying it's homicide, not suicide, he was hired by Epstein's brother to observe the autopsy. George Floyd, when he said it was on Chauvin, not anything else, that's after this Michael Baden guy was hired by Floyd's family for independent autopsy. And if I go back and look at O.J. Simpson, that was after he was hired by defense expert witness Same with Phil for JFK, hired by the HSCA forensic panel. So it seems like whoever hires him, he favors the autopsy towards them. I'm putting that out there, and I'm trying to find out what's going on with Epstein. I don't know if this Michael Baden guy gives me a lot of credibility. And then we got to do the timeline to see what happens here. July 23rd, 2019, Epstein found injured and semi-conscious in his cell with marks on his neck. Okay? Officials weren't sure if it was suicide attempt or assault. He was placed on suicide watch at the Metropolitan Correction Facility in New York. 6 days later, Epstein's removed from suicide watch. He's transferred to psychological observation, a less stringent status. The decision was made despite his prior injury and the high-profile nature of the case. Little weird. July 30th through August 8th, this is for the next week, Epstein is moved to Special Housing Unit, SHU. He is assigned a cellmate, Nicholas Tartagliano, a former cop facing quadruple homicide charges. Little weird. Tartagliano was the same cellmate when Epstein was found injured on July 23rd. All right, now we go to August 9th. Friday afternoon, Tartagliano is transferred out of Epstein's cell, reportedly at Epstein's request. This left Epstein alone in his cell, which violated MCC protocol for high-risk inmates. At this point, he was no longer under suicide watch or close monitoring. Suspect. Day later, August 10th. Epstein is found dead at 6:30 in the morning. He had apparently hanged himself with a bedsheet from the top bunk. No guard had checked on him for 8 hours. Surveillance cameras malfunctioned, and the 2 guards on duty fell asleep and falsified logs. And the government, Pam Bondi, releases the video, and there's a 1-minute break. It was like, wait a minute, we know somebody edited and messed with this at the 1-minute break. And then she tried to explain it to say, well, that's just typical what they've been doing for the last, decade plus. They typically have a minute before midnight that they do this with. Minute before midnight. He was dead at 6:30 in the morning. It's kind of weird what's going on there. And she said, well, we didn't find anything. The only thing we found is a lot of child porn, which we will never release to the public. That's what people are asking. This is kind of weird. Everybody told us there was something. All of a sudden, there's nothing. Now, watch this. And by the way, while I'm shooting this video, it's so crazy. And I'm going to show you updated right now while I'm shooting this video. Now we're getting an article from Wired. According to Wired, it wasn't just 1 minute that was cut. Further analysis shows that one of the source clips was approximately 2 minutes and 53 seconds longer than a segment including the final video, indicating that the footage appears to have been trimmed before release, and the amount of time is 3 minutes, not 1 minute that was cut. So give me a break. What can he do in the 3 minutes? A lot of stuff. By the way, 2 days before he killed himself, allegedly, committed suicide. You know what he did 2 days before he killed himself? Epstein's estate transferred $577 million into a trust he created 2 days before his death. And it was called the 1953 Trust. Why 1953? That's the year he was born. A little weird. 2 days before, kind of weird. Either you are like fully prepared, or it's a little weird. Remember how earlier we were talking about Bill Barr connection with the dad and all this other kind of little weird, Bill Barr, New York Times called him the ultimate cover-up general. New York Times called him that in 1992 when they were going through a complete different thing. Imagine Bill Barr's being called the cover-up general 33 years ago by New York Times. Damn! That kind of a reputation for this long? Bill Barr's role as Attorney General during Epstein is extremely significant. Why? Because some are calling this the ultimate potential intelligence cover-up. His background, past behavior in the context of Epstein's death led to many describing Barr as a CIA fixer or the guardian of the deep state. Again, allegedly, we're not saying this is the case. That's what people say, but New York Times, if you had someone called you New York Times in 1992 and something happens, fast forward 2019, that's a long time to have that kind of a reputation. He started in the CIA in the 70s while still in law school. Throughout his career, maintained close ties to the intelligence and national security circles. George Bush, CIA director turned president. Barr was the AG during the final years of Bush 41 administration. That's how long he goes back. He pardoned key Iran-Contra figures, effectively shutting down deeper investigations into covert arms and drug operations. And Epstein was arrested in July 2019 and died just 1 month later. Barr returned as Attorney General February of 2019, 5 months before that. Little weird. You can say whatever you want to say about this thing here. It's also another thing we need to put into evidence as we're doing the Epstein files. And by the way, that money that, the 2 days before he died, he moved the 577 million into the 1953 trust. That 577 million moved all the way down to 40 million. Just recently, January of 2025, the estate received another $112 million in a tax refund. Now the money is back up to $145 million. Used to be at 40 million. Little weird that the money is still moving around. And a couple names in this case you got to be looking at: attorney and accountant Darren Indike and Richard Kahn. And in the back end, as a backup, is a guy named Boris Nikolic. Boris Nikolic's background, what he does is another complete weird connection that you got here. Anyways, just a lot of stuff here on why the money is moving the way that it is. Now, let's look at what they found on their properties. In a New York one, they found some 170 cameras, hidden cameras everywhere, a fake Austrian passport. The Palm Beach property, there was hundreds of nude or suggestive photos, which, okay, somebody could say this guy has a fetish, he likes nude pictures. And then the one in Paris, one of the expensive ones, dozens of photographs on underage girls, electronic media, including CDs and hard drives that was found later on in New York. And then a contact list of high-profile European names. Okay, maybe he's connected there. But the place in New Mexico, kind of weird. Zorro Ranch in Stanley, New Mexico, 8,000 acres. You know what they found in this place? Obviously, cabin-style guest lodge in the desert, speculated to be used to isolating guests or girls, airstrip and helipad allowing discreet air travel. But watch this one. There was allegedly a secret underground structure or bunker. He used the ranch for eugenics and genetic experiments, including interest in transhumanism and seeding the human race with Epstein's DNA, reported by New York Times. What? Seeding the human race with Epstein's DNA, reported by New York Times. He had attempted to ingratiate himself with Los Alamos National Laboratory scientists and transhumanist researchers, possibly leveraging the ranch as a hub for influence or experimentation. Anyways, look, when you look at this, it's definitely a weird character. For you to come out and say there was no client list, there was nothing going on, there's a reason why the number of searches on him, according to CNN, is up 1,200%. One day was a #1 trending topic on Twitter. #2 had 110,000 searches. #1 was 2 million, and it was the Epstein. People are interested and they're curious. This was not part of Trump's 47 plan, the promises he made when he ran for office. It was not on any of the 20 promises that he made. Not one of them had to do with this. But it was something that other people, Cash, Bongino, Bondi, other people kept talking about. Oh my God, you should see what is in here. Everybody became so interested. Of course they're going to want to follow it. By the way, when names come up, oh my God, it's because Trump may be tied. You don't think Biden and Obama would have used it against him? If he had any ties, you don't think Biden and Obama would have just used this to say, hey, you better step out and not run for office, or else we're going to release this to everybody? They could have done that. How come they didn't do that? Why didn't they do that? If you had that? And why did Trump play so aggressive? As if nothing was going on. It's kind of weird, right? But we've seen pictures with him and Epstein and all this other stuff, and Musk with Epstein, Bezos with Epstein. When you start making money and you're succeeding, you're in a lot of weird parties that you go to. Not weird as in Diddy parties. Parties that you don't know who's there. Oh, hey, meet John, this guy's a billionaire. Oh, hey, meet Bob, he's the king of this. Oh, that's how people talk to one another. I remember I had Mike Tyson one time on a podcast, and him and I are talking, and in the podcast, he tells a story about a guy that one time he's taking pictures in, I don't know where he's at, New York or somewhere. He's taking pictures with all these guys. A few days later, the FBI and the SWAT and everybody starts coming to him, oh, police, hey, to the gym, Mike, what's up? You took a picture with this guy? Yeah, I did. How do you know this guy? I don't know this guy, I just took a picture. But how do you know? I had no clue who the hell this guy. I'm just taking pictures with a bunch of different fans. Do you know this guy just killed 8 people and wounded 19 people? What did you say? Yes, this guy is Dale Hausner. That's who it is, yeah. Let's take a picture. Let's take a picture. Let's take a picture. So take everything that you have and throw 99% of it out. But all you need is 1%. And to me, that 1% is plenty that I want to know what happened with this guy. That 1%. Too many weird things that are linked to this guy that I want to know. That's me. I'm curious. Maybe you are as well. By the way, if you have any sources, if you know anything about Epstein, if you were ever connected with it, connect me here. I'm curious. I actually want to know. If you want to be discreet and private so nobody will know, send me a connect here. I want to know if you know anything that's going on with Epstein that maybe the public is not talking about, good or bad. Give me all of it. I'm interested. connect me here. I will respond back to 100% of the messages. If you got value out of this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And on top of that, if you've never seen Diddy Files, click here to watch the Diddy Files. We got millions of views. A lot of people were curious to know what happened there. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye, bye-bye.